Hi, I'm Carmen,
And I'm Steven, and this is Vienna Past and Present.
where we walk through the gilded and sometimes not so gilded halls of Vienna's history. So, in part one, we left Vienna in what honestly sounds like a social democratic utopia. Public housing, education reform, healthcare, the works.
But let's not forget, Carmen, we left off on a crazy cliffhanger. Excitement here in Seattle has reached a fever pitch. So please end our suspense and end this for our tens of listeners. What, pray tell, is the proper German word for cliffhanger?
Oh, yes. The suspense.
Yes, killing me.
The moment you've all been waiting for. Okay, well, first of all, I feel very vindicated because I kind of didn't know the answer last time, right? And you kind of saved me by saying the cliffhanger was going to be the cliffhanger. But nobody knows the answer.
Whoa.
So the first person I asked was my cousin and her husband. I mean, they're both Austrian. He's Viennese. And he immediately dismissed it and was like, it's just cliffhanger. We just use the English word. There is no German word. And I thought, okay.
Sounds like a quitter.
Well, I also was like, okay, that's the end of it, right? Vindication that I didn't know it because there's no answer. But then some other friends of mine listened to the episode and they started a vigorous discussion in a group chat that I'm in with them about what the German word could be. So I have a few suggestions from them and I want to go through them now and kind of see what you think of them, how they sound to you.
All right.
I do want to give a quick shout out to Karina and Florence for these suggestions because they really, I think they really put some effort and time into coming up with this. So Okay, so the first suggestion they have is...
Thanks to them.
Yes, thanks to them. So the first suggestion that they have is Klippenhänger.
Okay. You know what? I could get it, but I mean, I don't see this like taking off like, Schadenfreude or something. Like that one's cooler, more different, at least to like the English speaking ear here. Anyway. Okay, Klippenhänger.
Klippenhänger. So yeah, and that's really a direct translation. Like Klippe is cliff, Hänger is hanger.
Okay.
So it's a direct translation, which you could use, but most people would just say cliffhanger instead. So I'm lukewarm on that one.
All right.
Then the next one is Zappellasse. How do you feel about that?
I would need a definition, right? I'm not just going to get it from context, but okay, like what does that translate to or how to...
Zappeln is to like be unsure or to be left hanging, right? So it's a thing that leaves you hanging. But this is a suggestion from Karina and shout out to her for the most original invention because this is not a real word. She invented it, but it works. People would kind of get it if you say it to them, ish.
Okay. Okay.
So that's a nice invention that I think maybe we can introduce now. So a Zappellasse.
Okay.
Then we had the suggestion of Oida, echt jetzt?
I feel like to my ear you started a new conversation or something. What's happening here?
Yes. I mean, kind of, yeah. Oida, echt jetzt. This is for sure the award for the most Viennese option because it's a very Viennese way to say anything. Oida, echt jetzt is like, what? You've got to be kidding me.
Oh.
It's sort of just an expression of not a cliffhanger itself, but like the feeling you get when there's a cliffhanger.
Yes, I was going to say, this gets to the emotional heart of the cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Okay. So I like that about it.
So yeah, that's a good one. I kind of like that Oida, echt jetzt as just like an expression. And then the last one that we have is Hängepartie.
I kind of like that. I mean, it suggests the word party.
It does.
It has that going for it. A hanger party?
Yes.
Like, what does this mean?
Yeah, pretty much Hängepartie.
Oh, that's pretty strong.
I think it's my favorite one too, because it's a word that people actually really use. And it does really express the same kind of idea. Like we're just all in a party left hanging.
Okay. Well, listen, I mean, all three of our German-speaking listeners, you know your assignment now. You have to try to spread these alternatives, and we'll see what sticks, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a task at hand. Klippenhänger, Zappellasse, Oida, echt jetzt. I mean, I think that one's commonly used in Vienna anyway. And Hängepartie are your options.
Okay, listen, asking the question last time, I feel satisfied by these answers, okay? There's not some magical one that everybody's already using, but a lot of strong contenders that would already be understood, and they sound kind of snappy in English, okay, to me. Like, as an English speaker, I'm like, none of these sound bad, okay? So,
all right.
Wow, all right. Yes, thank you to those who picked up the torch when Carmen had given up.
Yes, okay. I did immediately give up.
Thank you.
Yeah, true. I was ready to just give up at the first sign of any resistance. But anyway, so now that we've clarified that, the real cliffhanger last time was about what happens next with Red Vienna. And we left off, right, that was the actual point. Mm-hmm. We left off with the socialist experiment in full swing, luxury taxes to pay for modern living for the working classes, and Gemeindebauten like the Karl-Marx-Hof, allowing people to live with dignity, and a lot of wash basins.
Yeah, so if you squint a little, it almost sounds like this kind of modern-ish, Scandinavian-ish country dropped into the middle of Central Europe.
Exactly, but there is a catch. Because while Vienna was going full socialist experiment, the rest of Austria absolutely was not. They were going in a very different direction. Mm-hmm. So you have a real disconnect between the city and the countryside at this time, and it becomes an increasing problem in the 20s, 30s. And it's really hard to overstate how stark that divide really was. Vienna, we discussed last time a bit. You know, Vienna was massive. It was a huge city. It was about a third of Austria's population, and it was overwhelmingly working class and socialist.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you kind of think about this, it's like tons of people just dumped there in their like new home from all these other, you know, really other countries in a lot of ways, effectively, like these older places, you know, that used to be part of the empire. And I'm sure it was very different and probably very alien to like the, you know, Austrian farmers that lived like, you know, 50 miles outside of the city or something.
Exactly. And so outside of Vienna, it was very rural, it was Catholic, it was conservative. The people were very suspicious of everything that Red Vienna stood for. And I think it's fair to say also somewhat traumatized by the loss of land that came from the fall of the empire. So while Vienna embarked on a really bold experiment, the rest of the country was desperately trying to cling on to what it had left after the war. And, you know, Vienna didn't really have that sense as strongly, I don't think, because it's not like Vienna lost land. You know, the city itself stayed the same. More people poured in. But farmers and people more in the periphery, I mean, they did actually lose land in some cases, or they were border skirmishes, etc. And so it was, I think, a real sense of trying to hold on to what was left.
Right. Like just probably completely different experiences and issues, right? Like in Vienna, you know, we have active flu epidemics to deal with versus, you know, someone lost some acres over here. It would probably be hard for like the people to relate. Okay. On either side.
Yeah. So you had one giant progressive city surrounded by people who thought that it had lost its mind, basically. And of course, the split between the countryside and the city was both exploited and also exacerbated by the political parties of the time. So over time, there were two distinct camps that established themselves. The Social Democrats with their stronghold in Vienna on the one side, who, you know, we've already talked about a bit. They were the founders of Red Vienna. And then you have the Christian Social Party, which was the conservative camp on the other side. And they really had their stronghold in the countryside. And I think we need to also remember that this is all happening after the Russian Revolution and the rise of the Bolsheviks.
Yeah.
Russia had left World War I early as a result of the revolution, right? And it was something that the rest of Europe was, of course, very aware of. And so although this isn't the Cold War yet, it's definitely the precursor to it. And the fight both for and against communism is starting to shape up in this period.
Right. That would be like a big kind of unknown, scary thing happening, you know, to various people. Okay. Like they really would not know how that would end up at that point.
Yeah. And I think many people saw it as a huge opportunity as well. You know, many people really saw it as a way forward and a different way to approach things. So yeah, nobody exactly knew what it was at the time. And, you know, you have all of that going on in the background. And then in the aftermath of the collapse of the monarchy in 1918, paramilitary groups formed to help defend and also define the borders of the new Austrian Republic. Local states initially formed their own militias.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which by the late 1920s had banded together into a larger paramilitary group known as the Heimwehr.
Okay.
And so they saw themselves as protecting the motherland, but they also saw themselves as a bulwark against socialism, or what they saw as the dictatorship of the proletariat. And the proletariat, of course, is mostly in the cities, right? That's like factory workers, the working classes, and you know, farmers, peasants, etc. always saw themselves as different from that. And so they are trying to defend the borders, even defining the borders. I mean, this is not part of the story here, but Austria's borders were not properly defined until into the 1920s. There were still border skirmishes in the south about where the border was going to be exactly, and so that was an ongoing issue in the countryside.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so you had the Heimwehr, this paramilitary group that on the one hand wanted to help defend these borders, but then also they saw themselves themselves as a bulwark against socialism. And as the social democratic project in Vienna gained steam, the city then became a target for the Heimwehr, for this paramilitary group, and their understanding of what the country should be. So there was kind of this clash of, what should the country actually be? It's forming, it's this new entity, and nobody quite knows what direction it should go in. And so everybody's kind of fighting for their piece.
Just like literally, just trying to define itself. And I mean, had not been just Austria for how long? Like
hundreds of years.
Centuries.
Yeah. And so in response to the Heimwehr and their increasing in antagonism towards Vienna, the Social Democrats then also established their own paramilitary force in 1926, which was known as the Republikanische Schutzbund, which more or less I'm going to call the Schutzbund because it's shorter and easier.
Okay.
And so at this point, the stage was set for a showdown, but it would take a few more years to fully erupt. But things are very tense by the mid-1920s, and there are a few major events that help shape what's to come.
Okay, so we have this right-wing-ish Heimwehr.
Yeah.
This left-wing-ish Schutzbund paramilitary forces are now kind of like on the board, so to speak. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it is a bit of a case of, what is that rule in movies, Chekhov's gun or whatever, that if a gun is introduced, it must be used? I mean, I think it's that same thing. Like, if you have both of these paramilitary...
Okay, I've never heard of that, but okay, interesting.
That's like this concept. I think it's called Chekhov's gun. It's somebody's gun.
Okay, that's our next hunger... Oh, God, I almost remembered it. Party.
Our next
we can answer
party,
that next episode. That's how we can keep people listening. Okay, you know what? That's for later. Anyway...
One hanging after the other.
Continuous. No relief. Okay.
Okay. Well, speaking of which, a few major events. So the first major escalation that happened came in the summer of 1927 in an event that came to be known as the July Revolt of 1927.
Okay.
And that summer, there was a trial of 3 paramilitarists from the Heimwehr, so that's the conservative nationalist side, who had killed 2 people when they attacked a Schutzbund group after a protest and had injured many others. And they had killed 2 people, which were a World War I veteran and an 8-year-old boy. And actually, when I was writing this, I was like, oh, a veteran and an 8-year-old boy, that's horrible. But then I realized World War I was like 10 years before this, so it's not like a 70-year-old man.
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
Probably he's like 30.
Right. In my head, I was like, okay, so this is like, you're right, a 95-year-old.
I was also thinking an old man and a boy, like Jesus. I mean, not that it's better that it's a younger person, but...
Right.
And yeah, anyway, so there was a lot of evidence that these people from the Heimwehr had killed these 2 people, but the trial ended with an acquittal on July 14th.
Okay. I'm sure there was just, no reaction to that.
Yeah, it went down about as well as you would think. The acquittal was seen as very scandalous, and massive protests erupted in Vienna on the next day, on July 15th, and huge crowds tried to storm the University of Vienna, which is always a protest hotspot, as I can well attest to, because I also attended some student protests there in 2009 and 2010. That was a time when there were like student protests across the country, and we occupied the lecture halls for several weeks or months, I think, after the introduction of tuition fees, which American listeners will be shocked to hear that we had like months of sit-in protests over like a €300 fee per semester.
Yes, yeah. Very alien.
Yeah. Anyway, also in July 1927, there were protests at the university, and after this acquittal, and at that time, angry mobs stormed the university in protest. They attacked and damaged a nearby police station, and then they continued on further down the Ring Road. The university is also on the Ring. This angry mob then kind of swept along the Ring Road to the Justizpalast, which is the Palace of Justice, or like the Supreme Court kind of, which makes more sense as a target than the university, to be fair. Seems like that's where they probably should have been to start with.
You're right, yeah.
Anyway, when they get to the Justizpalast, things escalate, and the protesters begin smashing windows and entering the building. They destroyed furnishings and started setting files on fire, which is not really a good idea in an unruly mob because those fires spread very quickly, and suddenly the entire building was engulfed in flames. And so you have this massive fire that's spreading in this building. And another reason that it was able to spread was because protesters attacked the firefighters who showed up and cut their hoses.
Wow.
So they didn't let the firefighters do their job, and that allowed the fire to burn out of control for several hours. So yeah, long story short, you have this right-wing paramilitary that kills 2 people. They get acquitted. There's massive mob protests that erupt. They go to the Justizpalast and set the place on fire and then prevent the firemen from actually putting out the fire.
Yeah. Okay, it's a lot.
And then, of course, the police make everything worse, as they are wont to do. After demanding that the Socialist Democratic mayor of Vienna call in the Austrian military, which the mayor refused to do, the police then suppressed the protests with force, and they opened fire on the crowds, killing 5 police officers and 89 protesters.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, kind of a massacre, really.
A little bit.
Yeah. So things are not exactly going well. The protests have been quashed. I mean, that is the end of the protests. And the fire has been put out, but the battle lines have hardened and society is really beginning to fragment. Both sides feel the system is rigged against them and trust in the system has totally eroded. And then, shortly after this, there's another event that we are not going to discuss in detail, but that I think is an important backdrop for the rest of the story, and that's the 1929 stock market crash and Great Depression that also hit Austria very hard. And it led to the collapse of the Kreditanstalt, which was the largest bank in Austria in 1931.
Okay.
Probably that deserves its own episode at some point. But the point here is that the economy was in a shambles. The biggest bank has collapsed. There's been this revolt and riot and fire and massacre at the Justizpalast. Political tension is just at a fever pitch, and the hits just keep coming.
Okay, that is a very full plate. Yeah, that's like a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think not a great time in general, and presumably a feeling in the air maybe that, things are coming to a head here somehow. And we all know in these kind of circumstances what kind of characters usually emerge in these kind of conditions, and Austria in the 1930s was no exception. So enter one Engelbert Dollfuß.
Okay, quite a name.
Yes, Engelbert Dollfuß. I mean, it is a name. You have to give him that. But he's not exactly a towering, strong man. He's only about 1.50 meters tall, which is basically my height. And I'm a shorty. So he's a real shorty, and he's giving us all a bad name, I think.
Yeah, I know how this story goes. And yes, he's not one of you. Okay, don't worry.
No, I reject him. But I will say he got an amazing nickname, which was Millimetternich, which is just so good. It's so good.
That's really good. Yeah, we were talking about this before the episode. That one? Oh my gosh.
Millimetternich, I love it so much.
So great. Yeah.
So if you don't get the reference, go back and listen to our episode about Vienna as a spy city, which was episode 13, to learn about Metternich, who was an Austrian politician, and he was up in everybody's business. But anyway, Millimetternich obviously is a play on millimeter, and the name Metternich, and just being up in everybody's business. Yeah, so...
Possibly his best legacy, though, so...
yeah, it doesn't get better from here.
Let's keep listening.
So let's get a little background on him. So I'm talking about Dollfuß now. He was born in Lower Austria, about 100 kilometers outside of Vienna, to a lower middle-class farming family. He studied law, and then he fought on the Italian front in World War I, which was one of the toughest fronts in the whole war because it was basically a stalemate in very unforgiving terrain. So he's there, and then after the war, he returns to Vienna, and he enters politics, mostly working on agrarian issues. He was seen as the unofficial leader of the Austrian peasantry, and in 1932, he became Chancellor of Austria as part of the Christian Social Party. So that's this, countryside conservative party. And he believed very strongly in order, hierarchy, and the role of the church in society.
Okay.
So you could kind of tell what kind of, he's definitely a sort of dictatorial type. And this is where I will hand it over to you, Stephen, for the details.
Yeah.
And, I mean, spoiler alert, he does not like to share power, this guy.
Right. I will help you, dear listeners, understand why Dollfuß gives Austrian short people such a terrible name. So, yeah, he was initially known as a representative of the rural Austrian peasants months. His role was initially Minister of Forests and Agriculture, and he was then offered the role of Chancellor at age 39, so pretty young.
That is quite young. He must have been one of the younger ones, right?
Yeah, I didn't realize he was so young, and it's strange. You think about history like that, even, 100 years ago or so. It's like everyone is doing things at younger ages, and they're looking so much older in pictures, okay? I think that's always throws me off.
They look ancient, yeah, and then you find out they're like 25. Yeah. What?
Right. So I looked and I was like, oh, 55. Like, he didn't look old, but I just...
No, but he doesn't look particularly young either. I mean, he looks like the average age for a chancellor, which is probably mid-50s.
Something like that, yeah. So in a dramatic flourish, he didn't initially respond to this offer. He spent the night in a church praying before accepting it the following day.
Okay, I mean...
So yeah, he's starting off with theatrics.
Yes, maybe it's my cynicism, but that sounds so performative already.
Yeah, right. He led a coalition government at that point, made up of right-wing parties with just a single vote margin. So very slim, not some sweeping mandate at that time or anything. His government initially focused on the Great Depression, like we just mentioned, and solving Austria's lack of industry, because most of that capacity had been in Czechia, in the Balkans, areas that had just been lost in World War I.
Yeah, I think something people maybe don't know that much anymore is that Prague was the real industrial heart of the Habsburg Empire.
Yeah, that was interesting to learn, right? And gosh, like, not to get into some other rabbit hole, Habsburgy rabbit hole or something, but you wonder, you're like, okay, there probably was a lot of pressure to distribute it, right? As they have all these far-flung parts of this empire that, like, share very little in common half the time, like maybe some kind of power-sharing thing. Anyway, yeah, I was surprised to hear that so much of it was outside of Vienna itself.
Yeah, Vienna was like the bureaucratic part. Industry and stuff was more in Bohemia and the area around Prague. So yeah, that's all been lost now.
Right. So fast forward to March of 1933. There's a constitutional impasse over a parliamentary procedure where the lower parliament president resigned in order to be able to place a vote on an issue. It's kind of this wonky procedural rabbit hole that we'll skip. But that resignation, that led to this situation where the parliamentary session couldn't be concluded per the rules of the parliament. So when this procedural thing happened, Dollfuß took the opportunity to dissolve the lower house indefinitely, claiming it had become just totally unworkable. He then used a wartime law from 1917 to assume emergency powers. From then on, he ruled by decree, effectively as a dictator. So when the National Council, that lower house of parliament, tried to reconvene just a few days after, he had the police bar them.
Yeah, he really exploited that vacuum.
Right. I feel like he moved really quickly. And he then, outlaws his political enemies. It just kind of spiraled from there. So the Social Democrats in Vienna, they were still a force at this point, but they were no longer a legal party as they were before. So that's pretty big. They were just banned outright. So then the situation, as you might assume, it becomes even more combustible. Like, we already had these two kind of opposing paramilitaries that were sort of sitting there and, having spats every so often or something. But now, at a high level, there's one side that has the city of Vienna, and there's this other side that has the state, and they're now both armed.
And one is actually illegal now.
Right, right. I forgot that. One is officially illegal per Millimetternich. So, of course, it was waiting for a tiny spark. The tiny spark that started the chain reaction was this. In February of 1934, not quite a year after the parliament was dissolved, police were carrying out a search for weapons at a social party headquarters in Linz. At this point, Dollfuß was trying to disarm the Social Democrats and their Schutzbund paramilitary, and as a result, shots were fired. Within hours, it spread, first regionally, then to the city of Vienna itself, and that became the Austrian Civil War.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so things have really exploded now.
Right. So in Vienna, the fighting concentrated in working-class districts. Barricades went up, trams were overturned. The center of the Social Democrat resistance ended up being those Red Vienna showpieces that we've already talked about, the Gemeindebauten, the social housing complexes with the daycares and the laundries, especially Karl-Marx-Hof, which Carmen put on our social media recently, actually. Check that out if you want to see pictures of it. So obviously these buildings, they weren't meant to be military structures, of course, but they kind of ended up working like them. Like they were these massive blocks with internal courtyards, limited entrances. So they were kind of defensible. They were also filled with armed members of the Schutzbund, that social democratic paramilitary already. But the government responded with totally overwhelming force. The police, the army, even artillery was sent in. They were firing on these housing complexes in the capital city. Supposedly you can actually still see some of the bullet holes and the damage to some facades today. Carmen, have you ever noticed any of that?
I do know that they exist, but I can't say I've ever noticed. I don't think I pay enough attention.
Okay,
really.
So it's not like big and clear and...
No, it's
okay.
not. I think you kind of have to know where it is or really be on the lookout for it. If you're just walking past the building, you wouldn't notice anything.
Yeah, you're like on your phone. You're not seeing artillery holes in building. Okay, that's Carmen's level of engagement.
Okay. Rude.
She only sees city scales. Okay, this stuff like
Okay, first of all, I'm like a little Millimetternich myself, so anything above 1.50 meters is out of my view.
Not in her world, no.
That's the first thing. And yeah, maybe I should pay more attention. Yeah, all right.
Okay, but anyway, as I'm saying all this, I kind of feel like I'm building to this story about a war with crazy twists and turns, but actually the fighting, it only lasts a few days. That's great for the Austrian people at the time, but I'm very sorry about the potential like anti-climax here, as an episode.
Yeah, Austrian Civil War makes it sound like more than what it ultimately turned into, I think.
I think it's a little bit more about how we get there than the actual war, maybe one of those. Anyway, so the housing block design, it did help the defenders a bit, but the result was pretty decisive anyway. The Schutzbund was defeated in 3 days. Its leaders were arrested, executed, or forced into exile abroad. And just like that, Red Vienna, the political project, was effectively over. Yeah, so it didn't really end with some slow transition. It ended with this swift, violent suppression. The Social Democratic Party was eliminated, trade unions were dissolved, opposition disappears at this time. Austria becomes this authoritarian state under Dollfuß, supposedly modeled after Italian and Portuguese fascist ideas, and it's often called Austrofascism.
Yeah, the period under him is mostly known as the Austrofascist period.
Yeah, and then just a few years later, there's another huge shift. In 1938, Nazi Germany annexes Austria in the Anschluss. So whatever remained of Austrians' independent political trajectory at this point is then gone. And Red Vienna isn't just defeated, it's like buried under this entirely new regime, an entirely new nation. So yeah, really is not the focus, anymore.
Yeah, the amount of shit that happens, from the collapse of the monarchy to 1938, that's 20 years. And there's a lot going on.
Right. So imagine like how your life would change so many times, so completely. So, yeah, that brings us to today. The system they built definitely didn't vanish. The housing is still there. The infrastructure is still there. Also, the idea that the city can take responsibility for housing, health, welfare, that has really endured to, I think, a surprising extent, given the reaction at the time by outside forces and I guess some internal Austrian forces, but outside of the city, maybe, forces reacting to it.
Yeah, and given like how brutally it ended, or like how swiftly it just kind of was over, it actually has a very, very lasting legacy.
Yeah. So if you walk through Vienna today, you're walking through the results of just 15 years of this social experiment. And obviously, lots of other forces over time, but this is really a very visual one. It seems like a very enduring one. So yeah, Red Vienna didn't last very long, but long enough to leave a big impact. According to Vienna's website, almost 500,000 Viennese live in municipal housing today. So that's almost 1 in 4 Viennese apartments is a municipal apartment.
Yeah, so it's a totally normal place for people to live.
That's huge. I was shocked by that. I kind of was like, 10%? I don't know, something like that. But that's a crazy large amount. They have a website that is interesting to read through, and it really sounds like they put a lot of effort into it, not just kind of providing it, but like fashioning spaces that people would want and really having good relationships with the people who live there. And, that's just reading, one side, their website, but that seems like a positive take on it at least.
Yeah, we can link the website. I think, when you look at it, there's a map that shows where all the different Gemeindebauten are in the city, and there's a kind of pride in it, I feel. They kind of
feels like it
to show what still is there and where all these buildings are, and that the city is providing low cost or like very affordable housing to, like literally a quarter of the city's population. I think the city does, and the people in the city also take a pride in it.
Yeah, it seems like that to me. And if you're in Vienna now, there's an exhibition you can see until September. Carmen has some info about that.
Yeah, so actually, a friend of mine in the US sent me this, so I love when people outside of Austria are more informed than I am about what's going on.
Half of this episode is just other people, okay, so... Listen.
It's me not paying attention and other people having to clue me in. So thank you to Cole for sending me this. There is an exhibition that's on right now, and it goes all the way until September. It's called Auch für Nichtschwimmer, which means also for non-swimmers, and kind of a mix of things. So it's actually celebrating 100 years of the Amalienbad, which is one of the nicest public pools in Vienna, built in the 1920s, also as part of the whole Red Vienna kind of building project. It was built in an Art Deco style and was part of this whole idea of providing very nice spaces for the common people. And so to honor 100 years of the Amalienbad, the Waschsalon, which is the laundry rooms of the Karl-Marx-Hof, are hosting an exhibition that is on now until September 5th.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, so the exhibition itself is actually at the Karl-Marx-Hof in the former laundry rooms, so I expect a wash basin or two, and, maybe I'll bring a bag of dirty laundry. We'll see.
Just do not, I was going to say, if you go to these, do not move anyone's laundry out of the washer, okay?
Oh my God.
50% of people hate that.
Oh, I mean, you are asking for trouble if you're doing that.
Okay, not to sidetrack here. I don't care if people move my laundry.
Actually, I don't really care either, but I know other people care.
I don't really care. I know. And then other people are like, oh my God, don't do that. I was like, what? Okay, but now I know. That's the important part.
Anyway, what was the point? The point was that the Karl-Marx-Hof has this exhibition on until September 5th, and it's, first of all, a chance to go see the Karl-Marx-Hof, so I'm going to go check it out at some point in the next weeks, and then I can maybe give a little report on it. But I encourage anybody else, if you're in the city, you have time until September, you can go see it. It will give you a chance to go inside the Karl-Marx-Hof.
Yeah.
And also to learn about the history of public baths during the era of Red Vienna, which is what the exhibition is all about.
Yeah, very cool.
Kind of public hygiene institutions that were initiated during that period.
Yeah, very cool.
So I will post the link in the show notes, and people can check it out for themselves if they're interested.
Awesome.
So I'll be checking it out, and yeah, I've never been inside the Karl-Marx-Hof, like I said last time, and this would be a chance to go. So I got to get on it.
Okay, yeah, very interesting. Looking forward to those pics.
All right. Is that it?
I think that's it. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting story. It ends quickly, but interesting lead up, really interesting legacy. I liked this episode.
It's a real 180, yeah. Like it ends abruptly and just goes like 100% in the other direction, which, I mean, does not end well, as we know. Obviously, Nazi Austria also had a very big impact on the city and on Austria in general, but that's one that people really want to forget for the most part. Red Vienna is an era that people want to remember and that they are quite nostalgic for in some ways.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So there's a real contrast between those two. All right, well, I think that's it for our show. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, share with your friends or leave us a 5-star review. And if you didn't like it, well, then don't worry about that review.
Right. You can find us on social medias, Vienna Past and Pres on Instagram, or send us your episode ideas at viennapastandpresent@gmail.com.
Auf Wiedersehen, pfiat euch, Baba.
Bye.